Now we're going to get into this story about AOC hypocrisy here. For those who have not been aware, Governor Abbott and Governor Ron DeSantis have sent migrants from their states to some of these cities that have been identified as these sanctuary cities. So they sent a group to Martha's Vineyard here in Massachusetts, and they also sent a group to New York City. And I believe there was also a group sent to right outside of Kamala Harris's house. Obviously, this was a political move. Obviously, that's what this is really about. Let's just be real here. So they're trying to show, oh, let's just see how much they care about these migrants. They say they want to be sanctuary cities. So let's just go ahead and send them there and let's see how well they handle it and how they deal with it. I covered what happened in Martha's Vineyard twice, and I gave you guys an update on that. We talked about the migrant situation in New York City, and Mayor Eric Adams said that he was setting up basically like these tent communities for the migrants so that they would have a place to stay. Part of this apparently was in AOC's district. Now, before I tell you what she did, I want to remind you of what she did in the past in reference to the migrant situation that was happening at the border. Now, this is John from TYT, from the Damage Report. I just want to remind you of how AOC felt about the migrants then, and then I'm going to tell you what she did with the migrants in New York City.
I want to go back a year to literally the day or two before we first had who would then later become Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was down at the border visiting these facilities. She came back to her district. She Skyped into the show and talked about the experience. There were some photos that were taken at the time that weren't released until just yesterday. And here is one. There's others that you can see on her feed, but she's literally breaking down at what she's seeing there. And understand that she was having that 100% understandable, and I would say it should be the demanded response to what we're seeing there. This is before we knew about so much of it. We didn't know how horrendous the conditions were. We hadn't seen in a period of just a few months 6 kids dying, but she had a human response. And honestly, the opposition on the other side, they hate her for that. They're mocking her right now on Twitter for tearing up at this horrendous stain on our history that we're writing every day. Someday, hopefully, people will be able to look back with a little bit of perspective and know how right we were to speak out against these policies, to identify them as concentration camps. But that.
Okay, there's something that John said here that's really important. You make sure, because you have to remember when this took place.
To send a message to Mexico, to Guatemala, to El Salvador, all those countries. We don't want you to come, and so we're gonna convince you that if you get over here, you're going to suffer. Some of you might die. That is the official government policy. And so Melania doesn't care, Donald Trump doesn't care. I just wanna end with something I noticed, and it struck out as any human should respond to what we're seeing here in exactly the way I'm going to show you. Not as Melania did, with at best ignorance, if not disdain for these kids, and not trying to pass the buck like Donald Trump while putting horrendous, savage policies into place. I wanna go back a year to literally the day or two before we first had who would then later become Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was down at the border visiting these facilities. She came back to her district. She Skyped into the show and talked about the experience. There were some photos that were taken at the time that weren't released.
What's important to remember there, what John said, this was before AOC won. This was before she won. So just keep that in mind. She's still campaigning. Look at this picture. Look at this image. Remember, she was crying. She was so distraught. Broken up. There were multiple pictures. Now this video was uploaded. Why do they do this now where it shows it all the way at the bottom? It's kind of weird. I don't know why it's like this on here where you can't see the date. But the video is old, damn it. I don't know why I can't see the date on here anymore. This is weird. Oh, here we go. 2018, July of 2018. Okay. So remember, That's before she won. Let's see what her response is about the migrants today when they show up in her district. Now, I hate that Fox News got this right. I really do. But shout out to Case Study QB for clipping this. Let's see how she feels today, now that she's already in office and she's no longer campaigning, and the president is not Republican, he's a Democrat. Let's see what she does now about those migrants.
The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, has changed the location of that migrant tent city. It's going to move from Orchard Beach in the Bronx to Randall's Island. This happened after AOC complained it was in her district. Congresswoman Nicole Meletakis, Republican from New York, there are a few, joins me now. Congresswoman, AOC clearly has some real clout within the Democrat Party.
AOC complained about the migrant tent being in her district. She complained about it. Not in her backyard. You see the problem? Where's those tears? Where's those same tears that she had for those kids when she went down to the border? Oh, remember what John told you. She hadn't won yet. She was still campaigning. She's an actress. It gets worse. Listen to this.
Well, you know, it's interesting that she was complaining because she was the first one to say that she supports a sanctuary policy, she supports open borders, but it seems when it's in her backyard, she's against it.
What's going on here?
Well, look, it's an unsustainable policy. We need to get the mayor on board with those of us who are calling on the president to secure the border once and for all. You had 4 million people cross since this president has taken office, including those on the terrorist watch list, including those who are repeat offenders and criminals. It's a very unsustainable policy now that the taxpayers of New York City and America are being forced to pay for, at the tune of New York City alone, $1 billion.
And we're putting them on cruise ships. But you know, I mean, calling for the border to be closed, it's not going to happen. I mean, it simply is not going to happen, is it?
I believe it can happen. If
How?
we take that, because if we take the House, if we take the Senate, we will have more leverage to push back on this administration. Unfortunately, what you're seeing taking place right now is happening under one-party rule. When President Trump was in office, he put in place policies that restored order at the border. We were seeing people coming in orderly, having their claims heard. They had to remain in Mexico or on the other side of the border until those court cases were heard. Now what you're seeing is 4 million people entering our country. Many don't return back for their court cases. Right. And you have a mayor in New York City who is saying that the taxpayers of New York have to pay for the housing, the education, the health care, and the support for those individuals. I mean, my parents are immigrants. No one ever paid for their housing when they came here.
That is all understood.
And people always kill me when they come with that argument, when they always say, my parents were immigrants. My parents did this. My grandparents were immigrants. That was also a long time ago.
I have a mayor in New York City who is saying that the taxpayers of New York have to pay for the housing, the education, the health care, and the support for those individuals. I mean, my parents are immigrants. No one ever paid for their housing when they came here.
That is all understood. But you've got millions of them. They are here. I mean, they're here. They're not going back. They're simply not going to go back. So what should we do with them whilst they are here? We have reports that there are vans picking up Venezuelans in New York City and taking them to work on the cleanup in Florida. Do you approve of them working?
I approve of them working once they are approved for asylum. But if you have people here working illegally,
you'll never get that.
That is wrong.
So
Girl, there have been people living here working illegally for a long time. And some of the same people complaining about this, a lot of rich people, some of their landscapers, some of their cooks, some of their maids are also here working illegally. So I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. Probably some of hers too. Let's be real. But I think the point to mention too is that these are asylum seekers. But that just makes the situation even worse for AOC, because if you know they're trying to seek asylum, that's why they're here. Why would you push them out? It's in my district, so they must go. No, Just years ago, you were crying at the border. Oh my God, they're in the cages. Oh dear God. How many times has she talked about those kids in those cages since Joe Biden has been president, since there's been a Democrat president? Now you have migrants coming into your district where Eric Adams set up a tent community for them and you push them out? That's hypocritical to me. That's hypocritical, whether you're for this type of immigration or not. How can you be so sad and empathetic 1 minute and then the next minute you're pushing them, you're kicking them out?
Going to have 2 or 3 or 4 million people just sitting around doing nothing, not allowed to work.
That's why the court cases have to be heard quickly. You know,
but they're not going to be heard quickly.
Well, they have to add judges. That can be resolved.
But they're not going to be heard quickly.
Well, why not? Why can't we get to a resolution here where these cases are heard? We had 4 million people coming from 60 different countries. Many don't even qualify for asylum. That's why they have to add judges at the border, to make sure that they're being heard. Then they can proceed and enter the country. They can work and sustain and support themselves. This process that this mayor and this governor are supporting is irrational. It's unsustainable. It's not compassionate for the migrants who are being trafficked, for the drugs that are coming in and killing Americans, or for the American taxpayers that are being forced to foot the bill for all of this.
It's a contentious issue, but we're very glad to have you on in the studio discussing it. It's a very big deal.
Now, let's not be fooled by her either, though. If I'm not mistaken, let me see if he mentioned her again. I think, because if this is the same woman.
The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, has changed the location of that migrant tent city. It's going to move from Orchard Beach in the Bronx to Randall's Island. This happened after AOC complained it was in her district.
And notice what it says here. NYC mayor moves migrant tent city after protest. So she didn't mind. See, you know what? She pays attention to the things she want to pay attention to. Oh, we can't have those migrants here. Move them out of my district. It's really messed up. I hope people, all these AOC stands, I hope they really see AOC for what she truly is. I told you she was an actress. I told you she lied about her background. I told you she was not working class. I told you she went to BU. I told you she interned for Ted Kennedy. I told you she had a startup. This woman was a fraud. And it's okay to admit that. Whether you canvassed for her, whether you donated money to her, it is okay to admit that we got played and this woman is a fraud.
Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, Republican from New York, there are a few, joins me now. Congresswoman, AOC.
Yes, this is the woman. Let me fast forward so you can see her face. I thought she looked familiar. This is the woman that is against ending qualified immunity for police officers. This one right here. Remember that. So this is who AOC is now. You see what's happening with these Justice Democrats? Cori Bush, AOC. Cori Bush is probably the biggest disappointment. The biggest disappointment. This is terrible. I feel like this was all a grift. I really think that Justice Democrats was just a grift. Terrible. Terrible. I'm going to go to some of the comments. See the change. Damn, Sabby, you are so good at this. Your call outs are deep stuff I probably wouldn't have known or thought about. Oh, thank you. I have a good memory. So I remember what people said when they were running, you know. I watched a lot of this stuff. Thank you for the super chat. Praying Mantis. She is a mime. Remember the invisible handcuffs? I remember. You don't remember? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Monarch says, what is AOC's excuse for refusing immigrants? It was in her district. See how people are? They're all for this stuff until it shows up in their backyard. Not in my district, not in my neighborhood, not in my town. Soul Raster says AOC in training to be the next Nancy Pelosi. I agree. I could see that. I could see that.